For the single welt pocket exercise, there are 5 pieces. We have the garment fabric, the piece upon which the pocket is going to be constructed. We'll cut that piece from self. We'll identify our backoffs for where the welt is going to be placed. We have a pocket backing that's cut from one piece of fusible. That'll go to the back side of the self where the pocket is to support the opening. We have the welt. It'll be cut from self, and we'll cut one from fusible that we can fuse to the back side of that as well. We have the pocket facing for the lining of the pocket, and we're going to overlock the bottom edge. The bottom edge is the one that's not notched. Finally, we have the pocket lining, which will be cut either from lining or pocketing. And we're going to overlock this edge here. Those notches will align at the top there. We'll edge stitch this into place eventually. So here's the fabric upon which my pocket is going to be constructed. I've identified my punch holes. Here's my fusible. I'm going to place that on the back side, aligning it so that the punch holes are centered to the piece of fusible, and we'll fuse that into place. It'll end up looking like this when it's completed. And then we're prepared to start working on our welt. Our welt has been fused as well. What we're going to do is we're going to take the faces together along the long edge, aligning the cut edges together, and we'll backstitch here at the edge and sew both sides at 1/4 inch. Once we've sewn them, we'll go ahead and clip the corners to reduce bulk at those corners. We'll then open those seam allowances, and finger pressing is typically enough to open them up. We'll do that on both sides, and then we'll flip it to the face side. Once we have it flipped to the face side, we'll go ahead and give that a nice press, making certain again that our cut edges align nicely. Once the welt has been prepared, we're going to place it on the bottom edge of the punch holes. It's going to feel a little counterintuitive, but it does go on the bottom because eventually what's going to happen is it's going to flip into its correct position. So on the bottom edge, we want to make certain that the edges of the welt extend beyond our punch holes, and it should be a 1/4 inch on either side. We're going to sew that at 1/4 inch from the edge, catching just the edge of the welt on this side and backstitching as well here. One stitch off the edge on both occasions. When you've sewn that, it's going to look like this. Okay, so just one stitch, 1/4 inch away from the edge, just capturing one stitch right off the edge and right off the edge. So it's very stable. Then we're ready for the next step. The next step is to prepare our pocket lining and our pocket lining overlay for the back portion of it. As I indicated before, we're going to overlock the bottom edge. We'll align the notches at the top, and we can check for our punch holes as well. We're just going to line that like that, and we're going to edge stitch at the top and the bottom. Once you've done that, it will look like this when it's complete. With our pocket lining prepared and ready to go, we're ready to attach it to the self as well. We're going to place this face down on the top edge of the punch holes so that it nests right against the cut edge of the welt, and we're going to make certain it's equidistant on both ends. It should extend 1/2 inch beyond both sides. I'm going to place that, and then we're going to sew it in place just like we did the welt. However, instead of sewing all the way to the end of each piece, we're going to stop right where the backoffs are. So it's going to be a 1/4 inch inside of our sewn edge of the welt. So it'll be a little asymmetrical here when we get ready to cut it. But again, we're going to sew it 1/4 inch away from the edge, backstitch, and we're going to be 1/4 inch inside of the ends of the welt itself. When you've completed it, it'll look like this. I think you'll be able to see that in the camera. Yeah. So again, 1/4 inch inside the end, and the end, make certain you backstitch nicely on both ends. Once it's been stitched in place, we're going to turn it over, and if you like, what you can do is mark a line right in the middle, and then a 1/4 inch inside of your shortest line, you're going to go ahead and stop, and you're going to pivot up to the edge right there to create the line. And then we'll extend the line to the end of the sewing line on the welt as well. And then once we've done that, we're ready to cut. We'll cut on the line, and we'll cut up to but not through the stitching. Once you've cut, this is what it's going to look like. So again, we've cut up to but not through the stitching. You want to be very precise about that. When we're cutting, we want to make certain we're cutting the self. For the garment fabric only, we don't want to cut the welts if we can help it. Once we've done that, we're ready to turn the pocket lining to the inside edge. We're simply going to bring it through and give it a nice press once we've done that. It's starting to take shape. See how that goes into place like that at the welt. Once you've brought the pocket lining to the inside edge, You'll notice our triangles just sitting out right at the edge where we've cut. Now, some folks will tell you to go ahead and turn those to the outside edge, and we'll catch those later on when we get ready to sew the side seams. I lay them in place right there and just leave them that way. Once we turn this up into place, we're going to stitch this edge and this edge, so those get captured in there anyway. So it's a matter of preference. You can either turn them to the outside edge, and we can stitch them as we come back along our side seams, or we can leave them flat into place. We're ready to go ahead and fold the welt into place. We're going to bring that into position. And then we'll give it a nice press as well. Be careful with these corners. It tends to want to buckle just a little bit, so that's why it's really important that we clip right to the stitches but not through them. And then when we press, we want to make certain we press very cleanly. When you pressed, it'll end up looking like this. Okay, everything into position. I've left my triangles in position as well. At this point, we're ready to go ahead and attach the bottom of the pocketing to the bottom of the welt here. So we have the seam allowance on the welt where we sewed and cut open. What we're going to do is just bring that pocketing to the welt, seam allowance, aligning it here. We're going to turn it over, and then we're going to sew as close to the stitching as we can without going over. So we still want it to be in the margin between the stitch and the cut line, but as close to the prior stitching as possible along there, and that will capture the other part of the pocket so we have the pouch. Then all we have to do is sew the sides. Once our welt is in position and we've captured the bottom edge of the pocket lining with the welt seam allowance right there on the cut edge, then we're ready to sew the side seams. I like to just pull my fabric out of the way, or sew it 1/2 inch on this side, pull the fabric away, and sew it 1/2 inch on this side. You'll notice that I've overlocked the edges. If it's going to be a garment that doesn't have a lining, that's important. We want to make sure they're finished. If it's a lined garment, it's unnecessary. The final step is to capture the sides of the welt. We're going to edge stitch very close to this side and to this side. When you do that, make certain that your lining is in place, because it's also going to sew through the pocket lining. And if it's not in position, you're going to have to take that out and start over. So make certain your lining is pulled to the bottom and that you're edge stitching very close to this edge and that edge, and that completes the single welt pocket.